The massive central chamber of Concordia Station fell silent as the transmission ended. Representatives of 57 galactic species sat frozen in their seats, the gravity of what they had just witnessed settling over them like a shroud. The Karzak Dominion, a species unknown to most until 2 weeks ago, had delivered their ultimatum with cold precision. Captain Eliana Chen of Earth felt a chill run down her spine. She glanced around the circular chamber, studying the faces and body language of the assembled representatives. Some showed fear openly, trembling appendages, rapid breathing patterns. Others maintained rigid composure, though the tension in their postures betrayed their inner turmoil. "They want us to give them 1/3 of our populations," said Ambassador Thallo of the Nerith, breaking the silence. His crystalline voice echoed through the chamber. "To use as resources." The Vosek, elder matriarch Ziv, rose from her seat. Her ancient species had guided the Galactic Council for over 2,000 years. Her scale-covered face remained impassive, but her secondary eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of extreme distress that Chen had learned to recognize during her 3 years as Earth's junior diplomatic representative. "The Council must deliberate," Ziv announced. "We have 7 standard days to respond before the Karzak begin their harvesting." The word hung in the air, ugly and raw. Chen stood up, ignoring the surprised looks from the senior diplomats. Humans had only joined the Council 20 years ago, after their first successful faster-than-light journey had brought them into contact with the galactic community. They were still considered newcomers, barely given a voice in minor matters, let alone crises of this magnitude. "With respect, matriarch," Chen said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "What is there to deliberate? The Karzak are demanding we surrender billions of sentient beings for consumption or processing. The answer must be no." A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. The Kral war chief, Gornok, let out a barking laugh. "The human shows spirit, but spirit does not destroy Karzak warships. Did you not see their fleet? Did you not hear their claims about weapons that can destabilize stars?" Chen held her ground. "I saw. I heard. But some lines cannot be crossed regardless of the threat." Ambassador Thallo's crystalline form shimmered with agitation. "Captain Chen, your species is new to the stars. You have not seen galactic wars. The last conflict between major powers left 12 systems uninhabitable. The Karzak technology appears to be centuries beyond even our most advanced members' capabilities. So we just give them what they want?" Chen asked. "Sacrifice billions, now to save the rest temporarily?" The Tsallan representative, a small avian being named Pelri, chirped nervously. "They will take the youngest worlds first if we refuse. Humanity would be among them. Self-preservation alone should guide your position." Chen looked around the room, meeting as many eyes, optical sensors or sensory organs as she could. "On my world, we have a history filled with tyrants who demanded sacrifices. Those who gave in only delayed their own destruction." Matriarch Ziv raised a clawed hand for silence. "The human's passion is noted, but this body must approach the matter with the wisdom of ages, not the impulse of the moment. We will analyze the Karzak capabilities, assess our combined defensive options, and calculate the optimal response." "Calculate," Chen repeated, the word bitter in her mouth. "You're going to calculate how many lives to sacrifice." "That is enough, Captain," said Ambassador Rennick, Earth's senior representative, touching Chen's arm in warning. "We will respect the Council's procedures." The formal deliberations began immediately. Tactical experts from the Council's Defense Committee presented their preliminary analysis of the Karzak fleet. Over 2,000 ships of overwhelming firepower. Strategic AI projections showed catastrophic casualties even in the best case military response. Hour after hour, the evidence mounted in favor of compliance. Species with ancient histories detailed previous encounters with technologically superior threats, where only strategic concessions had ensured survival. By the 3rd day, private discussions among species representatives had already shifted from whether to comply to how to select those who would be sacrificed. Chen watched in growing horror as sophisticated algorithms were proposed to optimize selection criteria for minimal societal disruption. On the fourth day, the Kryal, renowned warriors who had never surrendered in their 5,000-year history, announced they would comply with the Kazakh demands. To fight without hope of victory is not courage but vanity, War Chief Gornak declared, to Chen's disbelief. On the evening of the fifth day, Chen sat alone in her quarters, watching the stars through her viewport. The council would vote tomorrow, but the outcome was already clear. Every major species had signaled their intent to comply, calculating that sacrifice was preferable to extinction. Her communication panel chimed. It was Admiral Takahashi from Earth Fleet Command. "Captain, our intelligence teams have completed their analysis of the Kazakh transmission and fleet positioning," he said without preamble. "We've identified potential weaknesses not mentioned in the council reports." Chen straightened. The council's tactical assessment seemed comprehensive. "It was based on assumptions that we don't share," Takahashi replied. "The council species have millennia of experience with standard galactic warfare, but sometimes fresh eyes see what experienced ones have learned to overlook." "Will it make a difference against such overwhelming force?" The Admiral's weathered face remained impassive. "Perhaps not, but Earth's leadership has made its decision regardless. We will not comply with the Kazakh demands." Chen felt a surge of pride, quickly followed by fear. "Sir, if Earth stands alone, then we stand alone," Takahashi said firmly. "The Security Council vote was unanimous. We cannot and will not participate in what amounts to galactic-scale human sacrifice regardless of the species involved." Chen took a deep breath. "What do you need from me?" "Tomorrow, when the Council votes to surrender, you will register Earth's formal objection. Then you will present our alternative." "Which is?" "The human defense fleet is already moving into position between the Kazakh Armada and the nearest populated systems. We will shield the Council worlds while they evacuate their most vulnerable populations. We're implementing Protocol Thermopylae." Chen recognized the reference, a small force standing against overwhelming odds, buying time with their lives. "How many ships?" she asked quietly. "Every available vessel. 342 combat-capable ships, plus support craft." The Admiral's expression softened slightly. "It won't be enough to win, Captain, but it will be enough to show the galaxy that some principles cannot be compromised no matter the cost." As the transmission ended, Chen turned back to the viewport, looking at the distant stars with new eyes. Tomorrow, the most advanced species in the galaxy would choose submission in the name of survival, and then humans would stand up. The council chamber erupted into chaos as Captain Eliana Chen finished speaking. Earth's formal rejection of the surrender terms hung in the air like a challenge. "The human delegation has lost its mind," shouted the Tsalan representative, feathers bristling with agitation. "They doom us all with this defiance." Matriarch Ziv raised her clawed hands for silence. The ancient Vosek leader fixed her primary eyes on Chen, while her secondary eyes scanned the room. "Captain Chen," she said, her voice carrying the weight of 2,000 years of diplomatic authority, "perhaps you misunderstand the gravity of our situation. The vote has been taken. 49 species have chosen compliance, with 8 abstentions. Only Earth stands in opposition." Chen stood straight, the digital display behind her showing the human defense fleet's current position, a thin line of ships between the Kazakh Armada and the nearest inhabited systems. "We understand perfectly, Matriarch," Chen replied. "Earth respects the Council's decision for its member species. We simply decline to participate in it for our own." Ambassador Thalo of the Neareth approached the central platform, his crystalline body reflecting the chamber's lights in fractured patterns. "What exactly does Earth hope to accomplish? Your fleet is barely 300 ships. The Kazakh have over 2,000. This is not courage, it is suicide." Chen activated a holographic display showing Admiral Takahashi's weathered face. The Admiral had agreed to address the Council directly from his position aboard the flagship Defiance. "Honorable representatives of the Galactic Council," Takahashi began, his voice calm and measured. "For most of human history, we believed we were alone in the universe. When we finally reached the stars and found this community of intelligent species, it was the greatest moment in our civilization's development. He paused, his dark eyes scanning the council chamber through the video feed. Today, we face a threat to everything this council represents: freedom, sovereignty, and the right of sentient beings to determine their own fate. Yes, our fleet is small. Yes, the Karzak outnumber us. But humanity's history is filled with moments where the few stood against the many because it was the right thing to do. War Chief Gornak of the Kral growled and stepped forward. Pretty words, human, but the Kral have fought 1,000 battles across 5,000 years. We know when a fight cannot be won. Your species is young and foolish. Perhaps, Takahashi acknowledged. Or perhaps we see something you've forgotten. Sometimes the purpose of a battle isn't to win, it's to show that you're willing to fight at all. The Admiral's display expanded to show tactical information. Our analysis suggests the Karzak fleet configuration has weaknesses that weren't considered in the Council's assessment. Their ships are arranged for intimidation, not combat efficiency. They didn't expect resistance. The Council's own military advisors studied the human analysis with growing interest. One of them, a grizzled Viridian strategist, looked up in surprise. The humans' observations have merit, he admitted reluctantly. The Karzak formation does suggest overconfidence. Chen watched as whispers spread through the chamber. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a tiny crack in the wall of fear. Earth is not asking the Council to fight, she clarified. We ask only that you evacuate your most vulnerable populations from the border systems while we buy you time. And what happens to Earth? Asked a small, rarely heard voice. It was the representative from Lyra, one of the youngest Council species. If you stand against the Karzak, they will target your world first. We know, Chen said simply. Preparations are already underway. Our civilian evacuation began the moment the Karzak ultimatum was received. On the tactical display behind her, the human defense fleet continued its deployment. The ships were small compared to the massive vessels of older Council species, but they moved with precision, taking up strategic positions that would force the Karzak to deal with them before reaching populated worlds. Ambassador Rennick, Earth's senior representative, joined Chen at the podium. We have transmitted our battle plans to all Council species. Should any of you choose to stand with us, you will know how to coordinate your efforts with ours. The chamber fell silent. It was an unspoken invitation, a door left open. This is madness, whispered the Tsalan representative. Matriarch Ziv studied the humans carefully. In all my centuries, I have never witnessed such a curious response to certain doom. Your species truly believes it can make a difference against the Karzak? What we believe, Chen replied, is that some actions are wrong regardless of who demands them or what the consequences of refusal might be. Surrendering billions of sentient beings to be harvested like crops is one of those actions. As the Council session adjourned, many representatives avoided the human delegation. Some shot angry glances their way, seeing Earth's stand as a complication in an already impossible situation. Others simply looked sad, as if watching beings too naive to understand their own impending destruction. But a few, a very few, approached quietly with questions about Earth's defensive strategies. Aboard the Defiance, Admiral Takahashi turned from the communication screen to face his command staff. Lieutenant Commander Imani Okafor, his tactical officer, stood at attention beside the holographic display of their fleet's position. The Council reaction was as expected, sir, she reported. Disbelief, followed by dismissal of our chances. Takahashi nodded. And our preparations? Proceeding as planned. The fleet is in defensive formation. Our supply ships are positioned behind the third moon of Viridian 4, hidden from Karzak long-range scanners. Fleet communications are running on rotating encryption protocols. And Operation Hornet? Okafor's expression turned grim. The strike teams are prepared, Admiral. If the Karzak advance, they're ready to execute their mission. Takahashi looked around the bridge at the men and women under his command. They all knew the odds. They had all volunteered anyway. The Karzak will expect us to behave like the council species, he told them. They'll expect calculation, self-preservation, retreat when faced with superior force. They don't understand what they're dealing with. What are they dealing with, sir? Asked a young lieutenant at the navigation station. Takahashi's weathered face broke into a small smile. Humans, Lieutenant. Just humans. On Concordia Station, Captain Chen received an unexpected visitor in her quarters. It was Dravik, aide to War Chief Gornok of the Kral. My chief sends a message, the massive warrior said without preamble. He says your stand is foolish but not without honor. Chen nodded cautiously. Thank you for conveying his words. Dravik hesitated, then lowered his voice. He also says, the Kral remember when we once would have made the same choice. Before, we learned to calculate odds and survivability margins. The warrior produced a small data crystal and placed it on Chen's desk. Tactical frequencies for 13 Kral battlecruisers currently stationed in neighboring sectors, he said. Officially, they will comply with the Council's surrender. Unofficially, they will be watching your fight with great interest. As Dravik departed, Chen stared at the crystal. It wasn't an alliance. It wasn't even a promise of help. But it was something the Council would never have expected. The first tiny sign that humanity's stand might not be entirely in vain. Outside her viewport, the stars shined coldly in the void. Somewhere out there, the Karzak fleet was approaching. In hours, perhaps a day at most, they would arrive to collect their tribute. And humanity would be waiting. Karzak fleet has exited faster than light travel, 300,000 kilometers in closing. Lieutenant Commander Imani Okafor's voice remained steady as she delivered the report. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Takahashi stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the massive enemy armada appear on the tactical display. They're maintaining formation, Okafor continued. No attempt to communicate. Weapons, systems active. Takahashi nodded. As expected, they don't see us as worth talking to. He turned to his communications officer. Open a channel to all human defense fleet vessels. The young officer worked quickly. Channel open, sir. Takahashi looked at the display showing the faces of his ship captains. Men and women of different backgrounds, all united in this moment. This is Admiral Takahashi. The Karzak have arrived. Remember your training and your purpose. We are not here to win. We are here to show the galaxy what it means to stand against tyranny. Today, humanity fights not just for itself, but for a principle, that sentient beings are not resources to be harvested. He paused. Whatever happens next, I am proud to serve with each of you. Takahashi out. He turned to Okafor. Begin Operation Hornet. All ships. Execute defensive pattern Theta 6. The human vessels spread out in a seemingly random pattern. To an observer, it might have looked like disorganization, perhaps even panic, but each movement was precisely calculated to draw the Karzak into engagement, while concealing the true strength of the human fleet. On Concordia Station, the Council representatives gathered in the observation center, watching the unfolding confrontation. On massive screens, Captain Chen stood apart from the others, her hands clenched tightly at her sides. The humans are using an unusual formation, remarked the Vosek military advisor. It appears inefficient. Perhaps they are attempting to flee, suggested the Tsalin representative. Chen said nothing, her attention fixed on the tactical display. The first attack came without warning. Brilliant beams of energy lanced out from the lead Karzak vessels, tearing through space toward the human fleet. 3 smaller human ships exploded instantly, vaporized before they could take evasive action. A collective gasp rose from the council representatives. So it begins, murmured Matriarch Ziv. The unfortunate but predictable consequence of defiance. What happened next, however, was anything but predictable. Rather than retreat or scatter, the human vessels accelerated, directly toward the Karzak armada. What are they doing? Ambassador Thalos' crystalline form shimmered with agitation. That's not a defensive maneuver. On the bridge of the Defiance, Okafor called out damage reports as they came in. Cruisers Resolute, Dauntless, and Orion destroyed. No survivors detected. Her voice cracked slightly, but she continued. Fighter squadrons Alpha through Delta launching now. Smaller vessels poured from the larger human ships. Hundreds of them, swarming toward the enormous Karzak vessels like angry insects. Execute attack pattern Hornet 1, Takahashi ordered. Target their command ships. The human fighters moved in coordinated groups, each targeting specific points on the Karzak vessels. The massive alien ships fired their weapons, destroying dozens of human craft with each shot. But the fighters were too numerous, too agile, and too determined. On Concordia, the Council military advisors watched in stunned silence. They're targeting the sensor arrays and weapons control nodes, the Krail tactical officer observed. Not attempting to destroy the vessels outright, they're disabling them. A clever strategy, admitted the Vosek advisor reluctantly. When facing a superior force, target their ability to fight rather than the fight itself. Chen allowed herself a small smile. The human defense fleet was implementing tactics developed from Earth's long history of asymmetric warfare, the strategies of the outnumbered and outgunned. Back on the Defiance, Admiral Takahashi grimly watched as the casualties mounted. 1 in 3 human fighters was being destroyed, but they were inflicting damage on the Karzak vessels. Damage that would force the aliens to adapt their strategy. "Sir," called out a sensor officer, "we're detecting energy buildups in the lead Karzak vessel. Different signature than their standard weapons." Takahashi's expression tightened. "They're preparing to use their star destabilizers." "There are no stars in the immediate vicinity," Okafor pointed out. "No," Takahashi agreed, "which means they're planning to use it against our fleet directly." He turned to his communications officer. "Warn all ships. Prepare for—" A blinding flash cut off his words as the Karzak weapon discharged. A sphere of distorted space-time expanded from the lead vessel, engulfing a section of the human fleet. 7 human ships, caught in the effect, seemed to stretch and compress before simply ceasing to exist. On Concordia, the display temporarily went dark from the energy discharge. When it cleared, gasps of horror filled the observation center. "Such power," whispered Thalo. "How can anyone stand against this?" But to the Council's amazement, the human attack didn't falter. The remaining fighters regrouped and continued their assault, now concentrating even more intensely on the lead Karzak vessel, the one that had fired the star destabilizer. "They're targeting the weapon's power source," the Krail tactical officer noted with growing respect. "See how they're focusing on that section of the ship? They identified the threat and adapted their strategy in minutes." On the Defiance, Takahashi received the grim casualty reports. Nearly 1/3 of his fleet was gone, and they had barely begun the battle. But the Karzak were now fully engaged, committed to destroying the human force before proceeding to the Council worlds. "Sir," Okafor said urgently, "sensors are detecting new ships entering the battle zone." Takahashi frowned. "Reinforcements from Earth wouldn't arrive this quickly." "They're not human vessels, sir." Okafor looked up, her eyes wide. "They're Krail warships, 13 battlecruisers moving to engage the Karzak rear flank." On the tactical display, the massive Krail vessels opened fire on the Karzak ships. Their weapons, while not as powerful as the Karzaks, were precision-targeted to support the human attack strategy. In the Council Observation Center, War Chief Gornok stood abruptly, his face a mask of fury. "What is the meaning of this?" demanded Matriarch Ziv. "The Council voted for compliance. Those ships are acting without authorization," Gornok growled. "Their commanders will face severe punishment." But there was something in his eyes, something that looked remarkably like pride. Chen approached him quietly. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what you're talking about, human," Gornok replied gruffly. But then, so softly only she could hear, he added, "They fight well, your people, with honor." The battle continued to rage. The human defense fleet, now supported by the Krail battlecruisers, pressed their attack. The Karzak, clearly surprised, by both the ferocity of the human assault and the unexpected Kral intervention, began to adjust their formation. On the Defiance, Admiral Takahashi allowed himself a moment of hope. They were still outnumbered, still outgunned, but they were no longer alone. "Sir," called out the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from Concordia Station. Multiple council species they're asking how they can help." Takahashi exchanged a glance with Okafor. "It appears the galaxy is watching. Commander," he said quietly, "and some of them remember what it means to stand up." The battle was far from over. The Karzak still held overwhelming firepower advantage. But as the human fighters continued their relentless assault, supported now by Kral precision strikes, a single thought echoed across the comm channels of the human defense fleet: "We are not alone." The observation deck on Concordia Station had transformed into an impromptu war room. What began as a gathering to witness humanity's expected defeat had become something else entirely. Representatives from a dozen species huddled around tactical displays, their previous disagreements temporarily set aside. Captain Chen moved between groups, answering questions about human battle strategies and coordinating with the growing number of species offering support. Tvosek had activated their long-range sensor networks, providing crucial intelligence on Karzak fleet movements. 3 near-Earth science vessels had moved into position behind Concordia, ready to deploy their advanced shield technology if the station came under attack. "The Karzak are regrouping," announced the Kral tactical officer, pointing to the main display. "They're pulling back to consolidate their forces." "They didn't expect resistance," Chen explained, "especially not from multiple species. They need time to adjust their strategy." Ambassador Thalo approached, his crystalline form dimmed with concern. "Captain, while this temporary success is remarkable, it doesn't change the fundamental equation. The Karzak still possess overwhelming firepower advantage." Chen nodded. "We know, but we've bought time. Time for evacuations, time for more species to join the resistance." She paused. "And time to implement the second phase of our plan." "There's a second phase?" Matriarch Ziv had been quietly observing from nearby. "Beyond this suicide attack?" Chen smiled. "With respect, Matriarch, if we were only planning to die gloriously, we wouldn't have bothered with strategy at all." Aboard the Phoenix, a mid-sized human vessel that had survived the initial engagement, Dr. Sanjay Kapoor worked frantically in the science lab. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, he had spent the past 3 weeks analyzing every scrap of information about the Karzak. "The spectral analysis confirms it," he told the ship's captain over the comm. "The energy signature from their weapons contains traces of palladium-derived compounds that can only be synthesized in the atmosphere of gas giants." Captain Maya Rodriguez frowned at the screen. "You're certain?" "Absolutely. The Karzak dependence on this compound explains why they're here, demanding biological resources. They're not conquering us because they're strong. They're harvesting us because they're desperate." Rodriguez's expression hardened. "Send your findings to Admiral Takahashi immediately, then prepare for Phase 2. On the Defiance, which had suffered heavy damage but remained operational, Admiral Takahashi received Dr. Kapoor's report with grim satisfaction. "This confirms our intelligence," he told Commander Okafor. "The Karzak are resource-dependent. They need to continually harvest biological matter to synthesize their weapons' power source." He turned to his communications officer. "Transmit Dr. Kapoor's findings to Concordia Station and all allied vessels." Minutes later, on Concordia, Captain Chen presented the information to the assembled representatives. "The Karzak aren't invincible," she explained. "Their technology requires constant resupply of specialized compounds. Their massive fleet is both their strength and their weakness. It requires enormous resources to maintain." War Chief Gornok leaned forward, his battle-scarred face intent. "So we target their supply lines?" "Exactly." Chen brought up a star chart. "Human intelligence vessels have been tracking Karzak movements for weeks. We've identified 3 key supply routes." She highlighted them on the display. Small, fast ships could disrupt these routes while our main forces hold the defensive line. The Tzalan representative, who had been among the first to advocate surrender, ruffled his feathers nervously. But the Karzak fleet between us and those supply routes is still overwhelming. Yes, Chen agreed, which is why we need to divide their attention. Across the sector, as the main Karzak force regrouped to continue their assault on the human Kral defense line, something unexpected occurred. A Vosek science vessel appeared near a distant Karzak supply ship, scanned it thoroughly, then disappeared into faster-than-light travel before the Karzak could respond. Similar incidents began occurring throughout the sector. A Nyrith cruiser would decloak briefly near a Karzak communications relay. A Tzalan reconnaissance craft would approach a Karzak fuel depot. None attacked, they simply observed and retreated. In the Karzak command vessel, Overseer Vexnar faced a decision. These small incursions posed no immediate threat, but they suggested a coordination among species that the Karzak had not anticipated. The intelligence reports had described a divided galaxy, ripe for conquest. Divert 3 battle groups to secure the supply lines, he ordered. The rest will continue the assault on the main resistance force. It was exactly what humanity had hoped for. On Concordia Station, Captain Chen addressed an expanded war council. Representatives from 22 species now attended, many joining remotely from their ships. The Karzak have split their forces, she announced. This is our opportunity. We need fast, stealthy vessels to target their supply ships while our main defense line holds the remaining battle groups. To her amazement, volunteers came forward immediately. The Tzalan, whose avian-descended species had built the fastest ships in the galaxy, offered a squadron of stealth corvettes. The Nyrith provided cloaking technology. The ancient Vosek contributed navigation data that would allow Allied ships to use unstable space-time corridors as shortcuts. Even more surprising were the tactical suggestions that poured in. Species that had initially dismissed humanity as primitive now recognized the value of unconventional thinking. Your people's strategy reminds us of the Third Galactic War, said a Vosek elder to Chen privately. Before battle computers and probability algorithms, when intuition and courage still mattered. Aboard the Defiance, Admiral Takahashi coordinated the defense line's reconfiguration. With Karzak forces reduced by nearly a third, the immediate pressure had lessened, but the remaining enemy ships still outnumbered them significantly. Incoming transmission from Concordia, called out the communications officer. Multiple species are dispatching ships to support our position. Takahashi allowed himself a small smile as the tactical display updated, showing new Allied vessels moving to join the defense line. What had begun as a lone human stand had evolved into something unprecedented, a true coalition. Commander Okafor approached with a data tablet. Sir, Captain Rodriguez reports the Phoenix is in position for the next phase. Takahashi nodded. Tell her she may proceed when ready. The Phoenix emerged from faster-than-light travel deep in Karzak-controlled territory, alongside 5 Tzalan stealth corvettes. Their target, a massive Karzak supply vessel carrying processed biological material from previous conquests. No detection signatures, reported the Phoenix's sensor officer. They don't see us yet. Captain Rodriguez studied the enemy ship on her display. It was minimally armed, designed for transport rather than combat. Perfect. Deploy the infiltration team, she ordered. A small shuttle launched from the Phoenix carrying Dr. Kapoor and a specialized team of human scientists and engineers. Their mission, not to destroy the Karzak supply ship, but to board it. Remember, Dr. Kapoor told his team as they approached, we need samples of the processed material and access to their synthesis technology. This isn't about damaging one ship. It's about finding a weakness in their entire resource system. The infiltration proceeded with remarkable smoothness. The Karzak, confident in their dominance, had not expected anyone to be bold enough to board their vessels. Within hours, Dr. Kapoor had what they needed. The team extracted safely, returning to the Phoenix with detailed scans, material samples, and, most valuable of all, Karzak data cores containing their biological processing protocols. As the human and Tzalan ships prepared to depart, Captain Rodriguez sent a final message to Admiral Takahashi. Phase 2 complete, we have the key. Back on the main defense line, the Admiral received the news with satisfaction. Inform Concordia, he told his communications officer. The tide is turning. 3 Earth days after the infiltration of the Karzak supply vessel, Concordia Station hummed with unprecedented activity. The main conference chamber, once a place of formal diplomatic proceedings, had been transformed. Tactical displays covered the walls, communication stations linked to ships across the sector, and representatives from 34 species now coordinated their efforts against the Karzak threat. Captain Chen stood with Admiral Takahashi, who had transferred his command temporarily to Concordia after the Defiant suffered critical damage. Around them, species that had barely communicated with each other before were now working side by side. I never thought I'd see this, Chen said quietly. The Kral and Nerith sharing tactical data, the Vosek and Tsalin coordinating fleet movements. Takahashi nodded. Fear divided them. Purpose unites them. A commotion at the entrance drew their attention. Dr. Kapoor hurried in, carrying a data tablet, his face alight with excitement. We've done it, he announced, approaching Chen and Takahashi. The analysis of the Karzak biological processing system is complete. Representatives gathered around as Kapoor displayed his findings on the main screen. The Karzak require a specific enzyme complex derived from sentient neural tissue, he explained. They use it to stabilize the exotic particles in their weapons systems. Without a constant supply, their technology deteriorates rapidly. So that's why they demand living beings, said the Tsalin representative, feathers bristling with disgust. They're harvesting our brains. Yes, Kapoor confirmed. But here's the crucial part. Their processing system is incredibly specific. It was designed for a particular type of neural tissue, likely from their original conquest victims. They've adapted it over time for other species. But this adaptation makes their entire system vulnerable. He displayed molecular diagrams that most of the representatives could not understand in detail. But his conclusion was clear. We can create a synthetic compound that will appear identical to their sensors, but will trigger a cascading failure in their processing technology. A poison, War Chief Gornak said with grim satisfaction. Essentially, yes, Kapoor agreed. But we need production facilities to create it in sufficient quantities, and we need a delivery system. Chen looked around the room. We need everyone's help for this to work. To her amazement, there was no hesitation. The Nerith offered their molecular fabrication plants. The Vosek contributed their extensive knowledge of particle physics to refine the formula. The Kral began planning the delivery strike force. Even the Tsalin, once the most vocal advocates for surrender, volunteered their fastest ships to distribute the compound to Allied forces across the sector. Admiral Takahashi watched with quiet pride. Your Dr. Kapoor has given us a weapon, he told Chen. But it's the coalition you helped build that will win this war. Not everything went smoothly. Ancient rivalries and conflicting tactical doctrines threatened to fracture the alliance at critical moments. During one particularly heated argument between the Kral and Vosek commanders about strike priorities, Chen stepped in. We understand your civilizations have disagreed for millennia, she said. But today we fight together or we die separately. The Karzak don't care about your history. To them, you're all just resources to be harvested. Her directness, once considered rude by council standards, now cut through the diplomatic fog. The commanders grudgingly agreed to compromise. Throughout the coalition fleet, human officers often found themselves in similar positions, not commanding other species, but mediating between them, finding common ground, keeping the alliance. Functioning Commander Okafor, now leading a joint strike force of human, Kral, and Tsalin vessels, explained the human perspective to her alien colleagues. On Earth, we fought each other for thousands of years before we learned to work together. You've had peace for so long you've forgotten how to set aside differences for a common cause. The Kral commander grunted. Perhaps peace made us weak. Not weak, Okafor corrected. Just comfortable. Danger is reminding you how to be uncomfortable together. As the coalition prepared for what they hoped would be a decisive strike, Captain Chen received a priority message from Earth. The Karzak had detected the growing resistance and changed their strategy. A battle group of 30 ships had broken off from the main fleet and was heading directly for Earth. "They're hoping to force our surrender by threatening our homeworld," Takahashi said grimly when Chen informed him. Word spread quickly through the coalition. The response surprised even the humans. Without being asked, the Vosek diverted a defense fleet to Earth's solar system. The Nearth provided their latest shield technology to Earth's orbital platforms. 3 Kral battle cruisers set course to intercept the Karzak force. "We protect our allies," War Chief Gornak stated simply when Chen thanked him, "as you were willing to protect us when we would not protect ourselves." Meanwhile, Dr. Kapoor's synthetic compound moved into mass production. Coalition scientists worked tirelessly to produce enough to affect the entire Karzak fleet. The delivery plan was complex. They would need to introduce the compound into multiple Karzak supply vessels simultaneously to prevent the aliens from identifying the threat too quickly. Commander Okafor would lead the main infiltration team targeting the largest Karzak supply hub. Small, stealthy vessels from 7 different species would target other supply points throughout Karzak-controlled space. The night before the operation was to begin, the coalition leaders gathered one last time to review the plan. The mood was tense but determined. "There are no guarantees," Admiral Takahashi reminded them. "The Karzak may detect our efforts. They may adapt more quickly than we anticipate. But this is our best chance to end their threat permanently." Matriarch Ziv, who had initially advocated compliance with the Karzak demands, now stood firmly with the resistance. "When the humans first stood against the Karzak, I thought them naive," she admitted. "I calculated only the probability of victory, not the cost of surrender." She looked around the room, her ancient eyes resting finally on Chen and Takahashi. "Your species reminded us of something we had forgotten, that some principles cannot be compromised, regardless of the odds." War Chief Gornak raised his ceremonial blade. "Tomorrow we fight not just for survival but for dignity. Whether we succeed or fail, we will do so on our feet, not on our knees." A cheer rippled through the chamber, species with vastly different biologies and histories united in common purpose. As the meeting concluded, Captain Chen looked out through a viewport at the assembled coalition fleet. Ships of dozens of designs and origins moved in coordinated patterns, preparing for the coming battle. What had begun as a desperate human stand had transformed into something remarkable, a galaxy remembering its courage. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" Takahashi asked, joining her at the viewport. Chen nodded. "Ready as we can be." She hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind for days. "Do you think we've changed anything, Admiral? Even if we win, will the Council remember this unity once the danger has passed?" Takahashi considered the question carefully. "Some will forget, some will return to old patterns." He smiled slightly. "But others will remember what it felt like to stand up. And that memory may be as important as any victory." Throughout the coalition fleet, final preparations were underway. Tomorrow would bring either a new beginning or a final end. But whatever came, they would face it together. The operation began at 0600 Standard Galactic Time. Across Karzak-controlled space, small coalition vessels slipped past enemy patrols, each carrying samples of Dr. Kapoor's synthetic compound. Their targets: 17 key Karzak supply ships responsible for processing and distributing the neural enzymes that powered the alien fleet. Commander Okafor led the primary team aboard a modified Salin stealth vessel. Her target was the largest processing hub in the sector, a massive Karzak ship nearly 5 kilometers long. Her team included specialists from 6 different species, each bringing unique skills to the mission. "Approaching target," reported the Salin pilot, her voice barely above a whisper despite the fact that the Karzak couldn't hear them. "No signs of detection." Okafor nodded. "Remember, we need to access their central processing chamber. We inject the compound directly into their main enzyme reservoir, then leave immediately. No heroics, no confrontations unless absolutely necessary." The boarding went smoothly at first, Using Nearith cloaking technology combined with Vosek sensor scramblers, the team entered the massive Karzak vessel undetected. They moved through the cavernous corridors, passing holding cells where captured beings from various species awaited. Processing. The sight strengthened their resolve. They were halfway to the central chamber when alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. "We've been detected," hissed the Kral warrior accompanying them. "Not by this ship. Another team must have been discovered." Okafor made a quick decision. "We continue. The mission is all that matters now." Throughout Karzak space, similar scenes played out. Some teams remained undetected, successfully introducing the compound into the enemy's systems. Others faced resistance, fighting desperate battles to complete their objectives. On Concordia Station, Captain Chen and Admiral Takahashi monitored the operation alongside the coalition leadership. 8 successful infiltrations confirmed, reported a Vosek technician. 3 teams have gone silent, the rest are still in progress. "The Karzak fleet is mobilizing," added a Nearith sensor operator. "They've realized something is happening." Takahashi's expression remained calm, but his eyes betrayed his concern. "Have all reserves moved to support extraction? We need at least 12 successful deployments for the compound to spread effectively through their system." On the main Karzak supply ship, Commander Okafor's team fought their way to the central processing chamber. 2 of her team had fallen, but the rest pressed on with grim determination. "There," she said, pointing to a massive transparent tank filled with glowing blue fluid, the purified neural enzymes that powered the Karzak war machine. "Get the compound in there. I'll hold them off." As the specialists worked to introduce the synthetic compound, Okafor and the Kral warrior defended the chamber entrance. Karzak soldiers, tall, armored beings with too many limbs, converged on their position. "It is a good day to die," the Kral noted, raising his weapon. Okafor managed a tight smile. "Let's try to make it a good day to live instead." On Concordia, the reports continued to come in. 12 successful infiltrations. 13. 14. The minimum threshold had been reached, but at heavy cost. Several teams would not be returning. "Now we wait," Dr. Kapoor said, his voice heavy. "The compound needs time to circulate through their system." The waiting was the hardest part. For 3 days, the coalition held defensive positions, absorbing Karzak attacks while looking for signs that the compound was working. Casualties mounted. 4 more coalition ships were destroyed. Earth's orbital defenses, though reinforced by alien allies, were tested by repeated Karzak assaults. Then, on the 4th day, something changed. A Karzak battleship near the front line suddenly stopped firing. Its weapon systems went dark. Within hours, similar reports came in from across the battle zones. "It's working," Dr. Kapoor announced, analyzing the sensor data. "The compound is interrupting their ability to process the neural enzymes. Their weapons are failing." The coalition seized the opportunity. Ships that had been on the defensive now pressed forward, targeting Karzak vessels with weakened or inoperative weapons. The tide of battle shifted dramatically. By the 5th day, the Karzak fleet was in disarray. Without their superior weapons, they found themselves outmatched by the combined forces of the coalition. Reports indicated that some Karzak ships were actually retreating, something no one had witnessed before. On the 7th day, an unexpected transmission reached Concordia Station. It came from the Karzak command vessel, directed specifically to Admiral Takahashi. "They're requesting to speak with the human leader," the communications officer reported in astonishment. The main screen activated to show a Karzak overseer, a massive being with gray-blue skin and compound eyes. Behind him, alarm lights flashed, on a bridge in obvious disarray. "Human," the overseer began, his translator rendering his clicking speech into standard galactic language. "Your species has done what we thought impossible. You have compromised our resource system irreparably." Takahashi stood straight, his expression neutral. "We have disabled your ability to harvest sentient beings for your technology." "Yes. Require these resources to survive," the overseer insisted. "Without them, our civilization will collapse. Then find another way." Takahashi replied firmly. The galaxy contains countless resources. Your dependence on harvesting sentient beings is a choice, not a necessity. The overseer's compound eyes shifted, a gesture that the xenobiologists interpreted as consideration. What terms do you offer? The coalition leadership gathered quickly to discuss the unexpected development. Some advocated for the complete destruction of the Karzak fleet while it was vulnerable. Others, including most of the human representatives, argued for a negotiated settlement that would end the threat without genocide. In the end, the terms offered to the Karzak were firm, but not vengeful: immediate withdrawal from coalition space, surrender of their harvesting technology, and acceptance of monitoring to ensure compliance. In return, the coalition would provide alternative energy research to help the Karzak develop non-biological power sources. To everyone's surprise, the Karzak accepted. 3 months later, representatives from all coalition species gathered on Earth for a historic summit. The United Nations headquarters in New York had been expanded to accommodate delegates with widely varying biological needs. It was the first time many species had visited humanity's homeworld. Admiral Takahashi, now recovered from injuries sustained in the final battle, addressed the assembled delegates. The crisis has passed, he began, but its lessons must not be forgotten. We stood together against an overwhelming threat, setting aside ancient differences to protect a simple principle: that sentient beings are not resources to be harvested. Captain Chen, recently promoted and now serving as Earth's senior representative to the Galactic Council, introduced the main proposal: a mutual defense pact among all member species, with rotating leadership and shared responsibility. The Karzak will not be the last threat we face, she told the delegates. But whatever comes next, we will face it together, standing up rather than kneeling down. The pact was ratified unanimously. The newly formed Galactic Defense Alliance established its headquarters on Concordia Station, with Earth serving as its first coordinating member, despite being one of the youngest and least technologically advanced species. As the summit concluded, Matriarch Ziv approached Chen on the observation deck overlooking New York City. Your world is beautiful, the ancient Vosek leader commented. So much water, so much life. Thank you, Chen replied. We're still learning to appreciate it properly ourselves. Ziv's primary eyes fixed on Chen while her secondary eyes scanned the horizon. There is a phrase I have heard repeated throughout the galaxy these past months. Then humans stood up. It has become something of a rallying cry. Chen smiled. We just did what we thought was right. Perhaps, Ziv said thoughtfully, but in doing so, you reminded the rest of us what right means. She gestured toward the city. Your species is young, imperfect, still growing, but you possess something many of us had forgotten: the courage to stand on principle even when the odds seem impossible. As the sun set over Earth, ships from dozens of worlds orbited peacefully above. The galaxy had changed. Old barriers had fallen. New alliances had formed, and it had all begun because when every species refused to stand against tyranny, humans stood up.